Can you tell me about a time where you have experienced racism?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can tell you about 100 times.
I mean, you've told me some. But.
Right. I think it's hard to, one thing that I really, your viewership, Kelly, and what I want people who watch this video, who perhaps don't know me or don't know you, one thing that I want those people to understand is that every time I leave my house, my race is on my mind. Wow. I think that I don't have the luxury of leaving my house and not being very distinctly and uniquely aware that I'm a Black man. I think that, even from the ways that it infiltrates every part of my life. There are some things that I think is normal. My parents have raised me to think is normal, but probably isn't. It comes as a surprise to some of the people who don't know me super well and who haven't grown up in a Black household.
Like what? Because I know some of the things you're referring to. What are the some things?
So I've never really, since I've been old enough to really go out and do my own thing, I've never left my house anywhere without, whether that be for a jog, obviously to drive, I've never left anywhere without my ID. I think that it is important that I, always have the ability to identify myself to police officers wherever I go. There have been family members of mine who have been in the front yard of where we lived in Sugar Land, and we've been stopped by police officers and asked to produce identification. I'm not sure that that's an experience that is universal.
It's not. Tell everybody about being stopped with Schaefer driving home one night.
Oh, surely. It had been a pretty bad rainstorm, and this was years ago. So I was in high school, and there had been a pretty bad rainstorm. Actually, I was in college. I think Schaefer was still in high school. And there had been trees knocked over and flooding. And so Schaefer and I the next day had gotten up and gone driving to go look at some of the damage. Without getting you into every single detail, because I remember that day pretty well. We were driving down a road that wasn't too far from our house, probably about 2 or 3 miles. And we pulled up to a stop sign, and pulling up next to me was a police officer. We both pull up to the stop sign. I am now aware that there's police. I had seen him in my rear view coming up, but I knew he was there. We pull up to the stop sign at the same time. I stop. I wait a second. I start driving again. He stops at the stop sign for a little bit longer than I was, starts driving, slows down, pulls in behind me, and pulls me over. And I was like, I know that I didn't do anything wrong. Maybe there's something up with my taillight, so on and so forth. He asked me, what my name was, where we were going, why were we driving out here, and where we lived. And so I was like, I live at, 49151. I told him where we lived, and he said, well, point out to where that is. But point in the direction of point the direction of your home, point the direction that you came. He wanted really, specific proof as to where we were from. And then finally, after he asked us all those questions, I asked him, why'd you pull us over? And he said, well, you ran the stop sign. And I was like, I didn't feel like I ran the stop sign. He said, well, technically, the front of your tire was on the white line. And if any part of your tire is touching the white line, we consider that running the stop sign. So that's why I pulled you over. I can't, speak to what exactly that particular police officer was thinking, but I imagine that it had, I imagine that he wouldn't have pulled us over if he hadn't seen who was in the car when he pulled up next to us and stopped us at the stop sign.
So how did that feel? Like, how did that feel to be pulled over in your own neighborhood and asked to point out which direction that you live? What was going on inside?
I mean, I felt it was ridiculous, in my opinion. I thought it was, my parents did a great job of instructing us how you communicate with police officers. By the way, that's not a conversation that maybe every young man has to have with their parents, but my parents, from the time before I could drive, were telling my brother and I, this is how you talk to police officers. This is where you put your hands. You don't make any sudden movements. So it was a little scary getting pulled over. And it was also a little disheartening that I felt like I got pulled over for nothing. And I knew in my like I knew deep down I hadn't done anything wrong. Uh, I think that an experience like that, and it colors, experience, it all, blends together with kind of the entire experience that, being Black in America is. Another example of something like this is, uh, like I told you earlier, my girlfriend lives in Austin. I live in Houston. Um, I always make sure before I leave on a trip that my gas is completely filled, all my tires are checked, everything, because I don't, whether I was going to Baylor or whether I was going to Austin, I never felt comfortable stopping in small town Texas.
Wow.
We used to go visit my great grandparents in Florida, and I used to think it was odd when I was a 6, 7, 8, 9 year old. But my parents used to very intentionally take out a huge map and would map out our route. We would sometimes go the long way to avoid certain cities, as we're driving from Houston to Tampa Bay, Florida, as you were driving through Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. Um, but they would be very intentional about what cities we would stop in for gas, because there's some cities that we just couldn't.
They wouldn't stop in because they didn't feel safe.
They didn't feel safe. 100%. They didn't feel safe as parents, and they didn't feel safe as people, and they didn't feel safe as parents with small children.
Wow.
And I don't think I realized that as much at the time, but now it's something that I'm very cognizant of. So if you ever hear me driving to Dallas, driving to Houston, or driving back to Dallas from Houston to Austin, Waco, probably doing it on a full tank of gas with all 4 tires, made sure that they are good to go.
Wow.
So,
Thank you for sharing that.
absolutely.